Good morning, everyone. Unless you're in the Eastern time zone, then good day. It's 12 noon here in Pennsylvania. I'm Dr. Mole, for those of you who have not met me before, and this is Q&A for Unit 3, which is Sensation and Perception. So this unit, or this presentation, like the other Q&As, is dedicated to whatever questions you might have as they might pertain to sensation and perception. And as always, the social media, our Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, the @ThinkFiveable, please follow. So this topic, or I should say the practice for today, or the plan for today, whatever questions you have, and again, it's Q&A, it's for you to ask, it's for you to pose your questions. Anything about sensation perception, the eye, the ear, the different types of senses, the top-down versus bottom-up, whatever it is you want to know about, this is your time to ask, and I'll be happy to address any questions that you might have and go from there. And then there will be a practice item if there's time permitting. So those are the plans. That's the plan for today. So. All right, so we have a question. It appears to be mere exposure effect is actually mere exposure effect is actually in unit, I guess that's unit 9, which is social psychology. That won't actually appear on the AP exam. Mere exposure effect essentially is the more we see something, the more we tend to like it. Actually, I mean, technically, I suppose that could appear in the motivation emotion unit too, but mere exposure effect simply means the more I see it, the more I'm exposed to it, the more I am around it, the more I start to like it. That's what the mere exposure effect is there. It's a sensation. It's not sensation and perception. It could be motivation, emotion. It's usually in social. So that's mere exposure effect. Okay. So no problem. Another, and it could appear in the AP exam as a motivation, emotion. I'd have to see where that appears on the curriculum. So other sensation and perception questions. Okay, so two-part question here. It's two different questions, I should say. How the inner ear works. So you are talking about in terms of within the cochlea. This is for Anika, within the cochlea, specifically the inner ear, or are you talking about as soon as sound enters the auditory canal? Okay, so talking about the cochlea. So their middle ear is the ossicles, which is the tiny bony structure within the ear. It is essentially what takes those sound waves. When those sound waves hit our eardrum, it's going to create this domino effect that moves the ossicles, which in AP Psych is the hammer, anvil, and stirrup. Medical textbooks use different terminology, but for our purposes, we call it the hammer, anvil, and stirrup. So as that vibration hits those bones, it then hits the oval window of the cochlea. So you have the cochlea, which is this wind-up thing, kind of looks like a snail or something like that. And the beginning of it is this oval window. It gets hit. And I would say that the best analogy is if you have a tube of water, and it's like a hose, but let's say bigger. And what happens here is that if you hit one end of that tube, you can kind of see the wave go down that tube. So you hit it and the wave goes down. So if you take that tube and then coil it up, that right there has your cochlea. That's essentially what the cochlea is. It's that tube filled with liquid that's coiled up. Now within that tube is this thing called the basilar membrane. Now in terms of the basilar membrane, it is it has these little hairs, which we might call the auditory cilia. Cilia is another word for hair. And essentially, the best analogy I might think about is seaweed. Think about seaweed in the ocean, especially seaweed that you might be able to see, not the one floating at the top, but let's say at the bottom, or any type of plant life at the bottom. And think about how the waves move, the water moves, the current moves, and it moves the seaweed. The hairs, in a way, are sort of like that in the basilar membrane. As that tube is hit and the wave goes down, it moves those hairs in the same way it might move plant life at the bottom of a shallow ocean, let's say. So as those hairs are moved, that is essentially what stimulates. That's where the transduction occurs. Transduction is the fancy way of taking energy forces, sound waves, light waves, and turning it into a neural impulse. That's what transduction is. So as those hairs move, that creates the neural impulse that eventually goes to the auditory nerve and eventually goes to the brain. So to use an analogy, the cilia on the basilar membrane are like the rods and the cones on the retina of the eye. So whereas the rods, the cones, the retina of the eye correspond to light vision, here you're talking about sound waves, the hair waves on the basilar membrane, creating the experience of sound. So that's essentially the mechanisms to that. And if you want to follow up on that in terms of the inner ear, please do ask. In terms of pain, so there are some textbooks go into some details and more than others. To what degree the AP exam will cover this, I do not know for sure. But let's assume, I'll give the detail that I teach my students. So you have, first off, pain is, I don't want to say it's relative, that's not what I mean, but it's very easily affected by both physical manifestations. Obviously, if a stimulus, let's say, cuts us, that creates pain. There's also an emotional component to pain, where if you think about a person who has chronic pain, it affects their mood. And the mood, we now know, can also, and then the anxiety they might feel perhaps, can affect the pain in turn. So people who who specialize in pain management are going to look at both physical and emotional aspects of pain. Well, for our purposes, what I tell students is that there are two types of pain messages that are sent: A fibers and C fibers. So A fibers are essentially what are referred to as the fast pain. A fibers are highly myelinated because they're neurons. They have the myelin sheath, which makes the transmission go down the axon much more quickly. And so A fibers correspond to that very fast pain. C fibers, on the other hand, correspond to slow pain. They're not very myelinated. It's a very slow process. Now, we might say, well, pain is pain. I mean, how can one be fast and be slow? I would essentially say this. Think about if you step on a tack barefoot, that sharp pain, that essentially tells you, before your brain really even registers exactly what's going on, your body's already reacting to it. Your foot's jerking back, or you start reaching down to your foot. That would be A fiber, of course, A fiber communication, that pain going directly to the brain. On the other hand, C fibers, think of it as an aching back or a dull pain. That is what they might call the slow pain, or that might go down C fibers instead. Now, there's also one theory called gate control theory of pain, which has been, some have questioned it and some say it still has validity, but it could appear on the AP exam. Gate control theory suggests that in terms of a mechanism, there might be some barrier in our brain that might block out pain or might filter out pain or essentially be the gate to pain. In terms of the way it might work, or in terms of how it might apply, if a person is having, let's say, pain, and let's say they're about to get a shot. Here's a good applicable statement of this, or how gate control theory can apply here. Let's say I'm about to get a shot. So the shot, it might be painful, especially if you've never had shots before. If it's a young child that might get a shot or something like that. So sometimes what might happen is they might squeeze your finger while you're getting that shot. The idea here is that as the shot's being put on your arm and that's going towards your brain, the fact that I squeeze the finger, that's also going to my brain. And what that might happen is that the feeling of the finger goes to the brain, and that's blocking the ability for me to feel pain. So that's essentially what gate control theory suggests with respect to that. So, and if you have a follow-up question to either one of those, Anika, please feel free to ask. So, all right. Difference between a perceptual set and priming. You're welcome, Anika. Okay, so priming, well, let's put it this way. Perceptual set refers to a readiness to perceive a stimulus in a particular way. Now, let's say I have, let's say I play a sound and it's very vague, you can't quite hear it. Like you can't quite make, like you can hear it, but it sounds very mumbled and it's not exceptionally clear. And then I'd say to you, oh, what they're actually saying is 7 years ago, from the Gettysburg Address. So, okay, now you hear it again, and now it's much clearer 7 years ago. What's going on? Well, it's because you are perceiving it in a particular way, because it's based upon, and sometimes you might say, well, some might call that priming too. But what's happening here is that the perceptual set is essentially seeing things, or perceiving things, I should say, in a way based upon one's experiences, based upon what one knows, based upon one's cognition. Now, priming is considered to be more of an implicit process. Priming in this case is found more in it's technically it's taught in a different unit as far as I can recall, but for our purposes, it's more of how our cognition is. I'd say priming is more of a cognitive thing. In other words, in terms of a readiness to think in a certain way. So there's that classic demonstration where, okay, everyone say silk repeatedly over, silk, 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 silk. What does a cow drink? And people might start saying milk when the answer might be water. Baby calves might drink milk from their mothers, but the point being is that the incorrect answer is milk, the correct answer is water. But because we're saying silk, that silk sounds in our brain so much that when answering a question, what does a cow drink? Oh, milk. The priming in the effect in this case kind of affects more of our cognition, our readiness to think, whereas the perceptual set is our readiness to perceive. I don't want to parrot the term, but to see or hear something, let's say, based upon cognition. So I would say that's the general difference between the two. Perceptual set is perceiving, hearing, smelling, tasting thing based upon certain expectations or based upon what we know, and the priming effect is readiness to think in a certain way based upon experiences or something like that. So I hope that answers the question. Tammy, if you have a further question, please do ask to that. Okay, very good. So, all right. Can I explain signal detection theory? All right. So, signal detection theory, and it's been a while since I taught, so I'm just going back to, okay. So first off, signal detection theory, the idea behind signal detection theory is that it doesn't just refer to, sensing. In other words, to perceive it, it's not just sensation. There's also expectations that play a role. There's also other factors that can affect whether or not we, to use the term, detect the signal. Do we actually see it, hear it, smell it, taste it? So to give you, and then they give these terms, hit, miss, false alarm, miss, and so forth. So first off, how do we test it? So I'm going to play a signal, and I want you to let me know if you actually can hear. Let's say it's a sound test. Actually, in your schools, perhaps you every so often, every couple of years, you get called down to the nurse's office and have to do a sound test or a hearing test. Which did you hear it? Raise your hand if you hear it. Our state's required for at various grades. So, okay, I'm going to play the tone. You let me know if you hear it. So let's say I play the tone. Tone is played, and I say, yeah, I heard the tone. Okay, signal present. I said it was present. That's a hit. So, okay, then let's say I play the tone. I say, nope, I didn't hear it. That was a miss. I missed the signal. So let's say that I'm hearing it, or I'm listening in and I'm supposed to hear a tone. Let's say no tone was played, and I say, oh, I heard the tone. False alarm. And finally, let's say there is no tone played, and I say, nope, didn't hear a tone. That's a correct rejection. Okay, now what do we do with that? Well, what it tells us is that when we do research like this, we find out that sometimes, even though it might be present, the stimulus, our ability to pick up on the signal, I don't use the word detection because it's parroting, our ability to pick up on it might be based upon our expectations. I'll give you a kind of a real life example. For you seniors who are expecting, I know college acceptances are still rolling out, and I think like April 1st. Was there a big date for college acceptances? I've been so long out of the college, the college game. I can't remember the calendars, but I know there was some in the fall for those who did early decision and early action. Well, the point being that, okay, so let's say I'm waiting for a text. The college is going to text me whether or not I got accepted to this particular college. So, I put my phone in my pocket because, we're not supposed to have phones out in class. But I know that when I get that buzz that on my phone, it means, okay, they're going to let me know that, or I'll have the decision in my email or something like that. So I'm so anxious. I so desperately want to get this text message. I really, really want to get it. I really want to. I really want to get that message. And so I might actually feel the tone or feel the vibration, even though it's not actually there. So it, in this case, I was so wanting for it to happen that, well, guess what? I didn't actually feel it. Or actually, I felt it even though it wasn't there. That would be a false alarm in that case. Like I felt it. Oh, no, I did not. On the other hand, let's say there is a symptom of a disease, let's say, and you don't want to pick up on, let's say I'm just going to make up some ridiculous symptom for some made up disease. Ingrown toenail can be a sign of something very serious. It's not. I'm just hypothetical here. And so it's like, even though there might be pain, like pain receptors are being stimulated by the ingrown toenail, I might not pick up on it because I don't want to actually sense it. I don't want to feel it. And so I actually don't. It's a miss in this case. That's a kind of a goofy example, but one that it still works in this case. Would I say it's like a placebo? Placebo, okay, so expectation plays a role in placebo, but I wouldn't say it is the placebo effect. But in terms of the fact that expectation plays a role, yes, I would say there's that parallel, but I wouldn't take that any further. So I hope that answers the question. Again, feel free to follow up with the follow-up question on that one, if anything else on that one. So, okay, Weber's law. Not Weber's law, but Weber's law. Of course, it's not a speaking test, so who cares? Weber's law. It is, so Weber's law says the size of the just noticeable difference is directly proportional to the size of the initial stimulus. That it makes no sense to me or to anyone else. So what exactly is Weber's law? Weber's law is actually very simple if you think about it. Here's the analogy I often like to talk about. Suppose I give you some very, very weak iced tea. I make iced tea and I have an 8-ounce glass, let's say, and I put some mix in it, but just a little bit so that you're barely tasting it. It's like really, really weak. You know it's there, you can taste it, but it's way, way too weak. Okay, so Given that, and I'll ask for the answer in the chat, suppose I take a half a teaspoon, and I have this 8-ounce glass of very weak iced tea, and I take a half a teaspoon of iced tea mix, and I mix it in. Do you think there's a good chance that you will detect it getting stronger? Is there a good chance that you will pick up on the fact that it's gotten stronger if I place a half a teaspoon? The answer is yes. It's very likely that you would pick up on the fact that I just added that half a teaspoon. Now, let's say I do what every 8-year-old kid does. I make the iced tea, same glass, but this time it is remarkably strong. I put a whole bunch of iced tea mix in there, and this thing, it's so strong you could strip paint off of the surface or something like that. It's so strong, way too strong. And so I take then that half a teaspoon of iced tea mix and I put it into the mix, or into this this liquid. Are you as likely to pick up on the fact that it's gotten stronger compared to when it was really weak? What do you think? Do you think you're as likely, or it's easier for you to notice? Probably not. Okay. In other words, for you to just notice that it's gotten stronger, or just noticeable difference, different threshold, same term. In order for you to notice that it's gotten stronger, you're probably going to need a lot more iced tea, maybe 5-6 teaspoons of iced tea. So when there was a little bit, in terms of the strength of the iced tea, when it was a little bit, you only need a little bit to notice that it had gotten stronger. If there's a lot of it, in this case, the strength of the iced tea, you need a lot of it to notice that's gotten stronger. That's the idea behind Weber's law. Now, the second point to this is that it is proportional. So, essentially, it means this. It's a simple fraction. So that if, let's say, you have 100 grams of something, I'm holding something that's 100 grams, and let's just say I figure out that it takes 10 grams for me to notice that's gotten stronger. Okay, I'm making up the weights here, but let's just say we've established that for holding something, 10 grams is what it takes to get a just noticeable difference with 100 grams. So I'm holding 100 grams, and then 10 grams more, I'll notice it's getting heavier. Well then, how much more would I have to, let's say I have 200 grams, what would I have to put on for me to on that weight for me to just notice that it's gotten heavier? 20. It's directly proportional. It is directly proportional. And that's what Weber's law is. The definition, the size of just noticeable difference is directly proportional to the size of the initial stimulus, sounds very confusing at first, but when you break it down and you look at it that way, I hope that explains it a little bit better and can explain Weber's law. Okay, great. So, all right. Good way to remember bottom-up and top-down processing. So I'm just trying to think about which example I want to give to make this as easy as possible. And maybe there's not. Maybe it's just the fact it's so long that it becomes automatic. But I'll throw this to you. So, all right. First off, top down is where I am going to, so let's see here. I go into an art gallery. Here we go. I go into an art gallery and I see this painting. I see this painting and I see it's a very nice painting. It's a painting of a picnic scene. And I'm just looking at this picnic scene. I look at it and instantaneously I see it's a picnic. I don't have to sit there and figure out that it is a picnic scene. It's something that it just, it's there. Why? Because I've been to picnics before. I've seen pictures of picnics. I know what's, I have a very well-established cognitive representation, a schema, if you will, of what a picnic is. So, okay, great. Well, I look at it and I can instantaneously figure out that it's a schema, or it's a schema. It's a picnic based upon my schema. And so then I look at it a bit more and I say, how did they get that particular, how did they make the basket? Like, what did they do? Oh, they used that brush stroke and they used that color scheme. Oh, wow. You know, if you look at this color and this color, you would never think that put together would make this. See, what I'm doing here is that I start with the whole picture, literally. It was a picnic, but then I start looking at the individual elements. I start looking at the individual things to notice. Oh my gosh, there's lots of interesting brush strokes. There's lots of different color schemes. It was a very interesting way they went into figuring out how to make this painting. See, what I did was I started off with, I looked at the whole picture, and then I looked at the details. And the way I do is the whole picture, and then going down to the nitty gritty details and working my way down. That's how I think about top down. Top down is a cognitive process where it's based upon cognition, it's based upon experience, where I see this, and then I look at the minor details. Then I look at the parts that make it up. That makes it, for me, that's what makes top down top down. Now, if you can know that, then bottom up is very easy. It's the exact opposite. But from bottom up, here it takes, I have to kind of, and you might say, well, there's cognition involved in this too. That's true. But here it's, let's say I get this figure and I'm supposed to figure out the hidden image. There's a hidden image in this painting here. And I'm supposed to figure out, okay, so where's the hidden image? So I might have to kind of, see one detail here, see this detail here. I'm looking at the details, the minor details, and I am building up until I get to the conclusion. Oh my gosh, of course, this is, there's the hidden image. It's a picture of a face, or let's say. Let me give you an example. I'm going to pull up an example here. I'm going to put in the tab in just a moment because it is an excellent let's see here. Here it is. All right. This you've seen before. Maybe it's a picture in your classroom. Just give me a moment while I get this set up. Hopefully it sets up. So in the meantime, if you have any additional questions, there's another question pending, so I want to make sure I get to it. But because like this, I use this all the time, and it seems to work okay. Problem here is the way this is set up makes this a little bit more challenging. Here we go. Now, hopefully this will work here. So the thing about Q&A is that you don't know exactly what you're going to go over. So, all right here. Come on. All right. Bear with me here. There we go. All right, now hopefully this will work. And hold on. It's not. Problem is, it's. Let me do this. I'm going to unshare and then I'm going to share again. So just a moment here. All right. I'll appreciate your patience here. And you know what I didn't do? Sorry, just another moment. I apologize for this. All right. Almost there. I hope this is worth it. All right, and now and okay. Sorry for the delay on that. That took longer than I had to, but I appreciate your patience. So this is the famous two-way figure here. Do you see an old woman or a young woman? Like I said, this is a classic. Uh, the question here is, if you've never seen this before, then a person might see one but not the other. So one might see the old woman but not the young woman, or might see the young woman but not the old woman. Let's say they see the old woman. So, all right, here you have, and this is it's a very famous picture. It was first described psychologically by a guy by the name of Edwin Boring. Believe it or not, that was his last name. So I said, well, what do you see? Oh, I see the old woman. Right there, that's your top down. Right there, that's top down, because that's what you automatically see. No problems whatsoever. What do you mean that's the old woman? Well, there's her chin, there's her mouth, and there's her nose and everything else. That's top down. Okay, that's what you see. If I could, let's say I show this to you for the first time, I say, let me show you a picture of my grandmother, and I show you this top down, because again, there is a cognitive process involved. Now, let's say you can't see the young woman. Let's say the young woman you can't see. I say, well, you know what? Let me point out to you. Well, what was the old woman's chin? This is actually a neckline here. This is a necklace. This is her chin right here. This is her nose right here. This is an ear. And what you're doing here is that you're taking essentially feature detectors. That's why it's sometimes called feature detection theory. You're looking at the different elements, the different parts, and coming to the conclusion, oh, now I see it. Now this is I see the young woman. Oh, there it is. Of course, obviously. Well, what that did was it required a process of looking at the individual elements, putting together, and getting to the final and saying, oh, of course, it's the young woman. Okay, top down, you see the whole picture, and you could break it down to its elements. Bottom up, you kind of have to look at the individual elements and put it together to see this is what it is. So if you think about the top being the whole, the top being like what is the final image, or the whole image, or the final product, and then breaking it down to its individual elements, that should hopefully differentiate top down from bottom up. So that is the difference between the two there. So, all right. Again, if you have other questions, feel free to ask. Difference between agonist and antagonist, that's in Unit 2, but I'll answer that real quickly. Let me go to Nika's question. Is a puzzle without a picture top down or bottom up? Let me just get to Nika's question there. Doing a puzzle without a picture, do you mean bottom up or top down? So if you can ask or just clarify that question there, I'll be happy to answer it. So I'll say that agonist and antagonist, that's Unit 2, but basically an agonist is a substance that makes a neuron more likely to fire. It acts like a neurotransmitter, and so it fires off the neurotransmitters, whereas antagonists block neurotransmitters, and so they can't bind, and so therefore makes it less likely to fire. So yeah, it's actually both. It's a two-way figure. I'm talking about, because what will happen is that if I show this, some people will be able to see both, one or the other. Well, I should say one part that can see the other one just as easily. Sometimes what happens though is that you see the young lady, but they can't see the old lady, or you see the old lady but not the young lady. And so if I have to talk them through it, that becomes the bottom-up process. That's what becomes the bottom up, because in this case, I have to look at the details and put them together. So you can't see both at the same time. That's the thing about two-way figures, that you can't see both, but you can switch very quickly back and forth. When I say they can see both, meaning that they have the ability to see both is what I mean by that. So yeah, it's very few two-way figures can you ever actually see at the same time together. And even then, usually if you can see this two at the same time, it's usually because you're seeing a third thing. But that's a much longer explanation for something that goes beyond the scope of this course. So, all right. Other questions? If not, we can do a practice prompt. All right. So I guess we'll do the practice prompt here. Let's see here. I hope you have fun with this one. So the problem with doing practice prompts with a Q&A with a specific topic is that it's limited to a specific topic, whereas they could be lots of mixing and matching from different units here. So principles of sensation and perception can help us make sense of the world, but it can also lead us to make inaccurate judgments about the world. So for each pair of words or phrases, explain how the first word or phrase in each pair can cause the second to occur. So here we have top-down processing and overlooking a misspelled word, opponent process theory relating to perception and after images, and synesthesia, the judgment of food. So first off, I guess the question is there, and let me look at B real quickly too. The sense of olfaction is much different than the other senses. Describe one of those differences. So first off, is there a term or something on there that you don't understand? Let's start with that, because technically, well, it is. It's an open book test when you take this exam in May, but it makes it much easier to answer if you know what it is cognitively. Are there any terms that you're not sure of or need something explained there? So synesthesia. Synesthesia is, maybe you've heard of it, maybe you just don't know it's called synesthesia. Synesthesia is a neat perceptual phenomenon. It's technically more of a sensation thing. It's almost like the sensory hardwiring of our brain gets mixed up, so that people, when they hear sounds, they might see colors too. So they hear sounds, they start seeing colors. Or if they taste foods, they might hear sounds. They taste foods, they might see flashes of light. Or different colors create different tastes. Basically, it's a mixing up of different senses. So you have to excuse me one moment here. I have to take care of my kids who are fighting with each other. But if there are any other questions, real quickly, you can post them there. Sorry about that. All right. So looking at this prompt here. Okay, Jamie says, the top down, a person may read a sentence, and because they're looking at the big idea, they don't notice the individual words that make up the sentence and thus overlooks a misspelled word. I would say that's an excellent response that will probably score the point. Again, this is a prompt here. So yeah, the fact is that, so I'm going to type this in the chat. If I type this in here, you will note, if I said read it real quickly, Joe went to the grocery store. Now, you will notice that if you look at it a little bit more closely, that the word grocery is misspelled. You might have missed it because looking at the full sentence, reading through the sentences here, you say, okay, Joe went to the grocery store. Okay, there's that G-R-O, then Y. Oh, it must be grocery. And you might have missed that misspelling because of top-down processing. So in this instance here, because of using top-down processing, sometimes we might overlook that misspelled word. That's a very good application. So what part A is asking is, and they've done things like this in the past, you have two pairs of things. How could I don't say A and B, but how could the first part affect the second part? So how could top-down processing affect or cause overlooking a misspelled word? How could opponent process theory of perception affect afterimages? And how could synesthesia affect the judgment of the taste of food? So opponent process theory of perception is, have you learned in your classes about the opposing pairs of cones in your retina? In other words, we have red, green, blue, yellow, and rods for black and white. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound familiar? We have cones that could see red or blue, red or green, blue or yellow, and rods for black and white. So Nika says yes. Okay, good. That's essentially the opponent process theory. In other words, why do we see color perception? We have trichromatic theory. It says we have color receptors for red, green, and blue, RGB, red RGB cable. Perhaps you're familiar with red, green, and blue. That's one theory. And the second theory says that we have opposing color or opposing cone colors, where a cone could see red or green but not both at the same time. A cone could see blue or yellow but not both at the same time. And a rod could see black or white but not both at the same time. So that's essentially what the opponent process theory of perception is. So if you said something along the lines of, well, the opponent process theory, if you look at a green light for a certain amount of time and then you look at look away from it, you might see red and might say, oh, I'm seeing red, when in fact there is no red that's there. You're seeing the after image. And that's how you might apply opponent process theory in that case to the creation of after images. And sometimes, and this is something we have to be very careful, or we have to be cautious of, is that sometimes they might use a term that you don't know. And the good thing that you have going for you is that they acknowledge this to be an open book test. So if you don't know what the opponent process theory of perception is, maybe a quick look in your notes, oh, there it is, or a quick look in your book, oh, there it is, and you might be able to answer it. Bear in mind, you do not want to be looking up or thinking, oh, I can look up stuff and it won't be a problem. You only have 45 minutes to do 2 essays, and that time goes by very quickly. So if anyone wants to type out synesthesia and judgment of food or judgment of taste of food, we'll go back to that. So the sense of olfaction is much different than the other senses. Describe one of those differences. Now, they might not write the prompt like this, but they might put something in there to see if you understand olfaction, how it's different from the other senses. First of all, I use the word olfaction because if I use the sense of smell, that might make it a little easier. So to make it a little challenging, they might use a term that is not the common term, in this case, olfaction. First off, are we good with the definition of olfaction? That's one thing I want to know. Do we know what olfaction is? Okay, because sometimes they could throw that word on there and it throws people off. Gosh, what is olfaction? The sense of smell. Okay, so I will open up to in the chat here real quickly, either synesthesia, judgment taste of food, or B, does anybody want to throw out in the chat? Okay, Tammy, excellent. It doesn't go through the thalamus. That's one difference. It goes to the olfactory bulb, which is basically above our nose, and it's kind of between, it's at the base of our brain and between our brain and our nose almost. Okay, it goes to the olfactory bulb. Any other differences you could think of? I only know of 3. Maybe there's more than that, but so another difference is that it's not cross-lateralized. Another difference is that whereas, for example, left visual field goes to the right hemisphere and right visual field goes to the left hemisphere, right hand goes to left hemisphere, and so forth, the olfaction doesn't work like that. It's not like left nostril, right brain. It doesn't work like that because it doesn't cross-lateralize, in part because it doesn't go through the thalamus. The third big difference is that they really haven't categorized smells. What do I mean by that? You can categorize light waves. We know that there are perhaps receptors for red and green and blue and yellow. that there are different pitches. We know that there are different types of taste. Remember, sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami being the 5. But and in pain, we have pressure on our skin. We have pressure, hot, cold, and pain receptors. But for olfaction, we haven't categorized. We don't know if there's like 5 different types of smells, or 50 types of smells, or 100. It could be thousands. We just don't really know. So that would be the third difference, I would say, in terms of the sense of olfaction. Synesthesia and the judgment of food. Now you might say, okay, I know what synesthesia is, but what are they asking for this? In a prompt like this, they might ask you to become very creative. Okay, so that's a good start. Synesthesia with the smell and taste or sense at the same time. Well, the thing is that doesn't see, if food is presented to me as a reader, I might say, well, wait a minute, yeah, but how's that affecting one or the other? It wouldn't quite score there. Anika, are there 2 Anikas in here? Okay, did not realize that. Anika Nath writes, people with synesthesia might mix up their taste sense with another one that might cause a judgment. Well, I think you're very close to scoring that one, because in this case, there would, so it might cause what type of judgment? Like, you're very close to scoring there. It shows me that you understand synesthesia with that writing, with that prompt there. And this is where you just might have to be creative. So, and you're correct. So the person, let's say a person, and I'm going to kind of tell you how I might do this. Again, this is, like I said, sometimes if it's vague like this, you have to be very creative and just keep writing and writing and writing. So, and this is where also writing a definition might help. Synesthesia is where sensory signals are mixed up. So while I might taste something, I might hear a sound too. So if Bob eats a bowl of soup and keeps hearing pitches, Bob might say, I don't like this food because it's too loud or it's too low of a pitch. It sounds stupid, but that's the type of answer they might be looking for in this case. Synesthesia and the judgment of the taste of food. I'm judging it not based upon the food taste itself, but the way the light colors I see. So that might be what would happen there. So again, when you take this exam, when they and you take it and when they score it, they would examples. There's there's very little that you could put on there that would lose you the point. The only thing that you could write that would lose you the point, other than just not having the answer, is contradictory information. So you could just, if it doesn't give a scenario, you could give an example, of some kind. Let's say top-down processing and overlooking a misspelled word. Joey was looking over his essay and knew the essay so well that he could read the words, and because he could recognize the words, but he could not pick up on the small details of the misspelled word or something like that. So yeah, an example would definitely help in an FRQ like this, certainly. It doesn't have to be an elaborate example. It doesn't have to be a background. It doesn't have to have a background to it. It doesn't have to have a compelling plot. Just some type of example would be fine. So, okay. All right. So that is the practice FRQ I had. And there are practice FRQs on Fiveable on the website. There are, I think, maybe perhaps one of you has submitted a response to some that have been there so far. I do plan on going and giving feedback to those, because the FRQs, that's the whole exam. So I will give feedback. I will. Did I make them? Yes, I did. I made this one here. Unless you're seeing something directly from College Board, everything that your teacher ever gives you has been made up by them. The only FRQs we have are the ones in the AP classroom, which we can't use because it's their property. You can only use them in the classroom. But we do base them off of other FRQs. So like the writing here would be a little bit different. Those FRQs, when they make them, they are written, rewritten, edited looked at, probably a committee of several people looking at it said. Yeah, when they talk about concept application, this is something like what they might see here. But again, it wouldn't be just one unit. It wouldn't just be the sensation and perception unit. They could have something from motivation and emotion, and then the learning unit, and then biopsych, and then some other unit. This is something closer to the concept application here. So, and in some years they have used, pair one to the other. The other one is research method, which is unit 1. It's like I said, every teacher is guessing, but my guess is that we are going to be given a study, and they're going to ask questions about what was the hypothesis, or what's an ethical issue about this, or what is the conclusion they could make, something along those lines. That's what we think. So, but we could be wrong, but we're all left to guess. Well, I mean, it would be long. Would it be long for 15 minutes? I mean, I've said this in the past. I'm not recommending that you do this. FRQs, each point on an FRQ, you could conceivably answer with one sentence. If you really knew what you were talking about, you could answer with one sentence. But I wouldn't recommend that. They gave you up to 15 minutes to do it. So, I mean, maybe you can do it in 5 minutes, you're fine. But you know what? They give everyone 15 minutes because they want to make it standardized. So that's what they do. There could be multiple points to it. It could be 5, 6, 7, 8 points, and yeah, you would need 15 minutes. If there's 5 points to it, that's 3 minutes a point. So that's on average. So that's not as long as you think. A list of theories or key terms pertaining to this unit. Here, no, but okay, so I would say that the College Board, like if you're looking for just a list of terms, maybe not a single list, but stuff that is in different places, the College Board course curriculum, which is what every teacher has been more or less basing their year on. They've been a little vague about this. They say if it's in this, then that's all you need to know, but that's not quite true. But I'd say this is a good start. If you look at the curriculum, you have to scroll down a couple pages, but you'll see that there. So, I would start. So, Tigist, I would start with that. Are there lists out there? Yes. The thing about lists is that it's just, you get a list of terms, but then it becomes like a big Quizlet that you do, and then you kind of memorize these definitions, but you don't necessarily know them as well as perhaps you should. It's more of a case of, you want to look at the list, okay, what do I not quite know? Can I really explain this? Can I apply this? So, they have a rubric that's already made. So you have to understand, they will never judge on the quality of writing ever. That's not what this is about. This is not what they do. It's going to be, they look at it point by point. Did you put the information that we need to score the point? Yes, no. Did you put the information we need to score the point? Yes, no. Okay, that's what they do. I don't think they're deliberately trying to make a bell curve. I don't work for College Boards, so I don't know what they're thinking, but I don't think they deliberately try to make a bell curve. It just so happens that when you have that many people take it, the distribution kind of looks normal. So, we're gonna go over the rubric. Which rubric are you talking about? Are you talking about for this AP exam, like for the actual AP exam? Oh, you mean within the fiveable ones? Are you talking about there? So I guess, are you asking? So Tigis, are you asking? Oh, so what they release the rubric afterwards. They usually release it in late summer, early fall. If you're talking about the one from the AP exam, they don't release that for a while. What I do is I actually when they release the FRQ, which if it's like any other year, should be a couple days afterwards, I usually write my own FRQ and how I might score or how I think what might be scoreable. But that's as far as that goes there. So, yeah. Well, maybe what they do is they so yeah, sometimes on the College Board Classroom, they'll give you scoring criteria on the practice FRQs that are there. And on the findable FRQs that we have here, I will go over answers, but there's not a formal released rubric per se. So, all right. Are there any other questions I can answer for today? I hope to see you for the cram tonight. If you have a cram pass, I hope to see you there. Tomorrow afternoon or tomorrow evening, afternoon, depending on where you are, there's the 5:30 trivia, which includes some questions about what we talked about here today, and also Unit 4, which is learning. And yeah, and then next week I'll have Q&A for Unit 4. So with that, folks, I thank you very much for attending. I hope I was able to answer some questions and clarify some things. I had my Twitter handle at the very beginning of this, or you can tweet us at ThinkFiveable, and hopefully we will get in touch later on here in these sessions. Take care, everyone.
And cut.